Good afternoon, everyone. I will take this opportunity to welcome our respected panelists, moderator, and all our participants who are virtually connected for the first edition of the Mizoram Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum that envisions to remodel up the traditional shifting cultivation among Mizo local communities by introducing them to integrated model of agricultural activities and provide them with scientific approaches to cultivation methods. This is with an attempt to replace the commercial monoculture practices that supports farmers' livelihood but jeopardizes the food security and cultural values provided by shifting agriculture, all towards bringing ecology at the center stage. Moving ahead, I would like to first introduce our key speaker today, Dr. Bhupesh Chaudhary, IS, Additional Secretary Communications Technology, ICT, and IIT Delhi alumnus, a visionary and an inspiration whose efforts and initiatives have helped provide livelihood opportunities to the poor villagers with the help of funds acquired from the corporate social responsibility schemes, improved quality education and learning outcomes in the government schools of Siaha district to make learning more enjoyable for students. He helped started the Konkomutu Pathfinder program, smart classrooms and educational mobile lab christened EduFix. His concern about the health of the people of the district is unparalleled. He lamented over children as well as adults who continue to die in the district from preventable diseases. For this purpose, he initiated a mobile medical vehicle program so that rural folks from remote areas can access medical facilities with provision of free medicines. You are truly an inspiration to us, sir. May we now request you to deliver the key introductory talk and set the context for today's panel, sharing with us insights of your experiences and Mizoram's diversity and approaches towards indigenous communities and livelihood generation.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Cynthia, and all the panelists, all the participants who have joined here. Good afternoon, Dr. Kalpana, Dr. Jaydev, and Dr. Lalengzama, and among others who are present, Dr. John also. So it indeed is a privilege to be a part of this event, although I hope I wanted that this event would have not been a virtual event, and so that we could have met also and discussed a little bit more. But nevertheless, because of the situations, I think this is the best possible options that we have. And I would also, this is a very interesting topic right now, as all of you would believe, sustainable agriculture. Now, a lot of people talk about it. It is also very fashionable to talk about it. And this is one of the terms which is used and misused rather frequently in the government policies, in the education, universities, and everything. But I would really think, since all of you are here, we can discuss about what exactly is sustainable. We have to begin by defining what is sustainable. Sustainable, is traditional sustainable? Do we need to introduce a change in our traditional practices, or do we need to go back to our traditions to make it more sustainable? And and we also need to deliberate on whether going back to the traditions, is it going to solve our problems? Our problems are, we have to, while on one hand we have to look at the sustainability, the degradation of environment, and also worry about the productivity, the air, the water, and everything, and biodiversity, of course. But on the other hand, also we have to think about how are we going to feed more than 7 billion plus mouths that are in the world that are today. And there's a constant challenge between the food productivity and how do we manage it in a more inclusive way. So all these, I think this meeting could not happen at a more important timing, because now the things are changing so fast. And for example, what we thought when India was going through a rough patch in 1960s, 70s, when we were facing acute food problems, food shortages. At that time, the government decided, okay, they have to introduce focused program for use of fertilizers and groundwater use and all that, sedentary agriculture promotion, MSPs, everything. So at that time, green revolution was introduced, and that time it was hailed also. It was after, even in 90s, even in 2000s, when I was doing my studies and everything. So we all hailed the heroes of Dr. Subramaniam and everybody. So the heroes of green revolution. But obviously, we got some success there. But a lot of water has passed through the under the bridge right now, and the sustainability, the definition, our problems, our challenges, everything has changed. So indeed, it is a very good initiative by Balipara Foundation to discuss all these issues, and with all of you, the eminent panelists who are a part of this discussion, the technical knowledge which you bring in from the field exposure. So I think we should be able to define the objective of this meeting. I think is to define what is the problem, and then deliberate on what could be the possible solutions. So, for example, in Mizoram, a lot of people are saying that Jhum agriculture is a problem. Jhum, a lot of destruction of the forest land, this and that. So there are many people who are supporting the Jhum. Also, they are saying that Jhum is traditional, and Jhum has actually not done as much damage as it is thought to be. And the villain of the agriculture is the sedentary agriculture only. And that's what it started when the mankind started cultivating, like in more than 12,000 years ago. So what do you think? It is actually very funny. I read in a book that we think that we are taking care of grass, or the wheat is also a grass. The wheats and the cereals, they are all grass species. So we think that we are taking care of them, but I think it is the otherwise. We are in fact the prisoners. We have become slaves to wheat and rice, because the entire mankind, entire village, entire set of population is now involved in cultivating wheat or cultivating rice. After that, once the rice is produced, then they are busy in protecting that rice and wheat, and that's how the civilization started. So we thought that, okay, sedentary lifestyle, a man was a hunter gatherer, and he was moving all around and eating roots and berries. But then suddenly he got introduced to the cultivation, more sedentary agriculture, and we thought that, okay, now we don't need to do it. But to think about it, most of our energy started going in taking care of those plants only. And it is indeed the plants who have enslaved us, rather the other way around. And just like, the ultimate objective of any species is to self-propagate. So I think the grass, the wheat and the rice and the cereals, they have been the most successful because they have self-reproduced, they have self-propagated, they have protected their species 100 times more than what we think. So we are actually the slaves to those cereals, rather the other way around. So the whole thing has come a full circle again, where we are thinking again that what we are doing, are we doing it in the right way? Should we go back? Is it that the solution or not the solution? So I think maybe I'll give some panelists to come and join for a talk now.
Okay, thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. You indeed set up the tone for our discussion today. Now, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Professor Kalpana Sarathy, who is currently Deputy Director at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences at its off-campus at Guwahati. She is also Professor in Social Work at the Center for Public Health, School of Social Work, TES Guwahati. Professor Sarathy began her teaching career at the Department of Social Work, University of Delhi, and later worked for 12 years at the Department of Social Work, Mizoram University. She has lived in the northeast of India for 18 years. She has worked as a counselor at a women's resource center in an NGO at Delhi before taking off a career in academics. She has successfully guided several MPhil and doctoral candidates at the Mizoram University, and her research interests are in the areas of health and mental health, HIV/AIDS, and risk behavior. In the last few years, he has been particularly interested in research related to the impact of conflict on mental health. Over to you, ma'am, and I request you to now lead the discussion.
Very good afternoon, and thank you so much to the Balipara Foundation and for having this, panel discussion on a very, very important topic. I think very rightly, Ms. Dole has told us that Dr. Bhupesh Chaudhary has set the tone for this discussion, because when we are talking about more traditional land use patterns, which is what we are all here discussing about shifting cultivation, and we're looking at moves or transformative changes of some kind, both of them arguably bring in unintended consequences. So I think this discussion today is about trying to see what are the kind of challenges. And I think I'm taking a key from where Dr. Bhupesh Chaudhary had actually left off, because in very succinct manner, what he is telling us is that you need to first understand the problem, then look at what kind of challenges we have, and then how do we go forward. So saying those very, very brief words, we have experts, so I'm going to be moving on to discussing, to introducing our experts first. And we are fortunate that the Balipara Foundation and both of who are here, I think Mr. Bora is here as well as Ms. Cynthia Doli. Thank you for putting together this wonderful panel. It's a pleasure to introduce the panel to all of you. I'll begin in the order of how I'm going to be posing questions. So in the flow of that, I'm introducing Dr. John Zothanzama first. And Dr. John Zothanzama is an associate professor. He's at the Department of Environmental Science at the Mizoram University, which is a central university. And the Mizoram University has a lot of dedicated departments that work on issues related to environment. His own research, Dr. Zothanzama's research, has been in a number of projects related to biodiversity and environmental related projects in Mizoram. Notably the MiSalt project, or the Mizoram Salt project under the Food and Agricultural Office and the UNDP. This project has concentrated on improved Jhuming, and currently he's the coordinator also of a DBT funded project on biodiversity documentation and natural history museum establishment in Mizoram. But he doesn't restrict his role to just academics. Dr. Zothanzama has also worked as the secretary of Mizoram Sustainable Development Foundation since 2013. And this NGO, the MSDF, works for environmental sustainable development in Mizoram and is part of the Integrated Mountain Initiative. So welcome to the panel, Dr. John Zothanzama. And I will now introduce the next panelist, that is Dr. Lalengzama. Dr. C. Lalengzama is an assistant professor at the Department of Social Work in Mizoram University with a master's in social work with a specialization in community development. His research areas have focused on the very important aspects, and he brings the social science perspective into this panel discussion. So he has actually focused his research on tribal development, on community development, and on agrarian transformation. And Dr. Lalengzama has been, a student and a scholar at the Mizoram University, but he now teaches there. But he's also credited with having begun or initiated social work education at the undergraduate level at Hatim in Lunglei. And he has worked there for a significant number of years, after which he has moved to the Mizoram University at Aizawl. He's the author of a book, which is Agrarian Change and Tribal Development in Mizoram. So welcome to the panel, Dr. Lalengzama. And now we move to the third panelist, who also with his background in zoology, assistant professor, and he has worked at the Madhab. He has done his schooling from Kokrajhar in 2006, and he's graduated from the Science College in Kokrajhar. Thereafter, he moved to Guwahati, and he has done his master's in zoology. His doctoral research has been on the very important areas of behavioral ecology of the endangered greater adjutant and its breeding behavior. he has completed his doctoral studies at the Guwahati University, and during this work of his doctoral study, he has also got a chance to, or an opportunity to work on tropical forest birds in Dampa Tiger Reserve in He's an avid bird watcher. He's involved in organizing workshops for various students of colleges and the university, and on identification of birds and awareness. So this is very, very briefly a brief discussion. I thought I won't interrupt the flow of questions, so I've introduced all the panelists first, and then we will move to each of you. Okay. Now, I was just saying that the question that I'm putting forward to Dr. Lalengzama is also linked to the question that I had put earlier to Dr. John Zothanzama. So we are saying that, we know that despite all the shortcomings, and we've been hearing about that, and the environmental concerns, Jhuming cannot be stopped completely, as the lifestyle and the cultural ethos of the tribal people is closely governed by Jhuming operations. So, sir, can you elaborate to us about the impact of transformation from shifting cultivation to settled agriculture on agrarian structure in Mizoram, and what is the best possible approach in dealing with the indigenous concerns?
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the question. And first of all, let me put it in this way that shifting cultivation is embedded in the culture of the people who practice it, especially those of the tribals. And let me give an example from the Mizo society. So all the traditional festival like Mimkut, we have Pongkut and Saptarkut, the festival that we celebrate across the states, they are all linked to and they have rooted in shifting cultivation. So even the classification of season that we have here is also directly linked to shifting cultivation. So in this way, shifting cultivation have been among the tribals in not only in culture, but also in traditions and even in livelihood and other traditions and cultures. So in order to give effective suggestions, I think we need to understand how transformation have taken place from shifting cultivation to settled agriculture in the previous years. So I'm speaking based on the research findings that I have here, the research that I have conducted in Mizoram. So the first research was conducted in 2015, and now I am revisiting the same place and trying to understand what happens. So from that perspective, I'm going to give my statement today. So due to the transformation from shifting cultivation towards settled cultivation, agrarian pattern have changed, and agriculture is commercialized, and monocropping emerged, and people started growing commercial crops, not only in settled cultivation, but also in shifting cultivation field. Commercialization have taken place, and land in shifting cultivation and both settled cultivation, land occupy a central position, and most of the shifting cultivation have taken place in community-owned land, which is significantly shrinking, and the size is decreasing rapidly. And with the result of this, landlessness emerged even among the Mizos community. And with this landlessness, there is a landless working class that emerged from the society. So although this is not in a very large scale, but we are beginning to see that landless workers emerge due to the transformation. So on the other hand, it also improved income, expenditure, better living condition. But in the meantime, where the transformation towards settled cultivation incur more expenditure. That's why saving is not increasing. And when it comes to transformation from shifting cultivation, there is no proper market, and the local market are not properly placed. The systems are not set. And the process of transition is not a very fast process. It is still going on, but at a very low rate. And this commercialization, instead of stopping this transformation, we need to guide. We need to guide the transformation. Otherwise, if we don't guide the transformation, then it will go nowhere. So anyway, we cannot stop the transformation, but we need to give guidance and more careful thought about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You're actually telling us very correctly that, guiding that transformative process is important, and you've outlined some of the issues that have come up. May I move to the next panelist, and that's Dr. Jaydev Mandal. We'll come back to some of these issues later, but we'll go through these round of questions initially. Dr. Mandal, in a recent study of yours, it's been observed that shifting cultivation and Jhuming, conserves a larger population of bird species in comparison to monoculture forestry models. It also establishes that Jhum cultivation protects and supports collective ownership of natural resources by the indigenous community without government or policy intervention. So Dr. Mandal, according to you, what can be the appropriate approach for reinventing the traditional Jhum practices into a scientific and sustainable model of cultivation for the mountain communities?
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful question. So our basic work in 2014 was to look about the diversity of forest birds in the Dampa tiger buffer zones of Dampa Tiger Reserve, the largest protected area in Mizoram. So our initial work was done in 1994. Where we assessed different bird communities of Dampa Tiger Reserve. Then after the government new policies, okay, to change or completely eradicate the what's so-called completely degradation of forest, arising from shifting agriculture, we asked a question whether eradication of the shifting agriculture for the Dampa landscape is benefited for the community conservation or tropical forest bird conservation, or the new land use policies that were adopted by the government during that time were better formed. So at that time, what we did, we surveyed different state mosaic of landscapes of Jhum fields, which are locally known as Law in Mizo or Hu in Riang. So we compared the bird communities, their density, abundance, and richness with the newly introduced monocultural crops such as oil palm and teak. And what we found that oil palm and teak, they are the monocultures, okay, and not only that, they are also requiring some additional cares by the communities, okay, over there. So, and this is also, since this is also a monocrop, and it also requires a continuous supply of water, okay, and the villagers also suggesting us that the water level in the stream is degrading, and we also saw several tankers moving around and harvesting and this irrigating the oil palm fields. We did, we surveyed all those monocultures and shifting agricultures, that is Jhum or Law, and what we found that Jhum is much better form of land use than the newly introduced oil palm and teak plantations. That teak plantations are mostly plantation were done by the forest department, whereas the newly introduced oil palm, it has been initiated during the year of 2007 to 2008, and they are now continuing, and government is also providing some aids or subsidizing to the farmers who are switching from Jhum to the monocultural crops. But on the other hand, this shifting agriculture is a completely organic form of agriculture. Okay, and from where the farmers get all the edible items throughout the year. Okay, and they also harvest different types of byproducts like mushrooms and other things. So and this Jhum not only brings food security to the farmers, but this is also a traditional practice. And what I feel that government, instead of eradicating the Jhum cultivation, they should promote the farmers to do it in a more scientific way. And that could be really helpful for the conservation of various biodiversity in the landscape.
Thank you. That was very, very interesting, talking about, the very important aspects of food security as well as uh, traditional use. And I think both the panelists have discussed these issues on why it's important that the traditional land use or their perspectives on why that's important. The second panelist telling us more about how it also contributes to the richness of biodiversity if we were able to bring in more scientific aspects. Right? So Dr. John, we were, asking you to deliberate on the following question, that while we know that, shifting cultivation has a very important role in culture and livelihood of tribal societies, it is very often also seen or perceived as a threat to the forest ecological system and the environment as a whole. So we were, requesting you to tell us, what do you think, according to you, is the right approach to drive active participation of the indigenous communities in developmental interventions to discover an alternative land use pattern for sustainable hill farming? So the time is, now it's over to you, sir.
Okay. So regarding that question, I would like to answer it from the perspective of our experience in the field through the MISOLT project. As Madam Kalpana has said, we underwent a project under the support of the Food and Agricultural Organizations of the United Nations in the year 2016 and 17 here in Mizoram. So in that project, we found out very interesting things which may already be, I think, known by some workers earlier. But what I would like to share here is that three things are very important for the successful implementation of any new option or technology for the farmers. The first thing is that we have to convince the farmers. So since the farmers are the one who are actually doing the work in the field, so we need to have a very good collaboration, understanding of the farmers. So in our project, what we did was that first of all, we had meetings. We have selected 12 farmers in that project, both at Lunglei and Aizawl district. So we had meetings with them and rounds of discussions with them. So after these meetings and deliberations of questions and answers, after they were fully convinced about the new technology of the MISOLT, then only they were able to implement them in the field. They happily implement them in the field. So that is the first thing. The second was that the technology or the new method should be tried and tested. It should not be that just trial and error. It should not be of trial and error method. It should be tried and tested. So in our project, in the MISOLT project, what we did was that the MISOLT is a modification of the SALT. MISOLT, the acronym stands for Mizoram Sloping Agricultural Land Technology. So it is a modification of the SALT, or the Sloping Agricultural Land Technology, that has been much successful in many parts of the Southeast Asian countries, and then also practiced in many parts of the Northeast here already, and some other parts of India in hill farming. So the misalt is a modification of the salt, and it also with some local touch, local miso touch to it. So that is, so it is tried and tested. The local touch that we gave into the misalt is also already tried and tested by the miso farmers for many generations. So that is the second thing which is important. The third thing which I would like to share is that it should be farmer friendly. Any technology that we want to implement or technique that we want to implement should be farmer friendly. So in our misalt project again, the misalt is, like I said, modification of the salt, which is highly successful, as stated earlier. So what we did was that our forefathers, they used to lay strips of logs, or which is called as changkham, across the hill slopes, perpendicular to the hill slopes. So these are laid sometimes at 3 to 5 meters in between the in distance. These are laid in order to prevent soil from being eroded, soil erosion, to prevent the soil erosion. So we take in this technique of laying down the changkham. So the changkham are acting as hedgerows, which are used in the salt procedure technique. So the farmers are not much alien to the new technique. We are already improvising on the already known technique of them. So in the rounds of discussion also, they were quite happy with the technique. They took in the technique very easily. So it is farmer friendly. So that's why our project was quite successful in the sense that neighboring farmers of our selected farmers, they immediately copied what their farmers, their friends, adjoining farmers were doing. So these three important points are what I feel, what we have found out from our misalt project. And then next comes community and all. I think these community empowerment, or giving the knowledge to the community and then creating awareness through the communities are the next stages. But the first and foremost things are these 3 points, which I feel should be an important approach towards the success of any new technique towards implementing improvement of our cultivation. I think.
Yeah, thank you. That is actually very, very interesting, because I think all three panelists so far have been, very interestingly saying that the focus has to be on indigenous concerns and on the farmers. And if I hear what each of you have said, Dr. Lalengzama had also spoken about the commercialization and the landlessness that has occurred, and how we need to look at more scientific ways of bringing in practices. And then we hear also from Dr. Jaydev Mandal, who's been telling us that it's important that we use more scientific methods, and that it's important that we also understand the entire context of food security and livelihoods, and also the biodiversity. And then Dr. John, you're also telling us something very similar, and you're telling us that it has to be, at the end of the day, farmer friendly and with the farmer as a focus. So can I then, again ask you, Dr. John,
Yes.
now that you've said and you've shared a lot of your concerns and the project, and telling us what you're really doing about in terms of a response, is Jhum cultivation reaching alarming levels in Mizoram? I mean, if I were to ask you something like that, how would you respond?
Jhum, in general, it has been linked to what many consider as a spiraling cycle of deforestation, environmental degradation, rural poverty, and many other ill effects of Jhum are repeatedly being seen in the media, various media. frequently it is repeated claim is that due to population growth, the Jhuming cycle has also, which is called the fallow period, has also shortened. But an important question is, are these claims substantiated by relevant data? Do we really have clear-cut evidence? Do we really have clear-cut evidences of the impact of Jhum cultivation on these so-called ill effects, which we have cited by many workers? So that should be what should be borne in our mind if we question ourselves. Do we really have these data? Do we really have these real scientific evidence that is claimed by many? So during 2013 to 15, MZU has a very good collaboration with the University of Minnesota. So working on Jhum cultivation. So what we did was that I would like to share here that Daman Singh, daughter of the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, she did a work here in around 1995-96, almost 25 years ago. So she did some work on the Jhum cultivation. So what she has reported was that in 6 villages, she did work on the fallow period, study on the fallow period of Jhum. What she found out was that the fallow period in 1995-96 was around 7 to 10 years. So we revisited those villages, the UMN and MZU team. We revisited those villages, and then apart from that, we even interviewed the same respondents of the Mansing of 25 years back. Okay, so what we did was, what we have found out is that the fallow period was not increasing at all, decreasing at all. So it was the same 7 to 10 years in all these villages. And we also conducted between 2013 to 15 over 100 villages in Mizoram. We have surveyed and studied about the fallow period. And in almost all these studies, what we have found is that the fallow period is not increasing at all. In fact, in some villages, it has increased from 7 to 10 years to up to even 15 years, which indicates that there is not much pressure on the land. Our census data shows that Mizoram population is increasing. Likewise, all over the other states of India, even all other countries, populations are increasing. But what is very remarkable is that although these populations are increasing both in urban and rural, the pressure on the forest is not as alarming as it may seem to be from our findings. And I would like to also share that in the recent statistical abstract of 2019, what was shown that during a period of 10 years from 2008 to 2018, the fallow area is not increasing. In fact, there is a decrease from 170,000 hectares to 107,000 hectares. That is a decrease of 63,000 hectares during a period of 10 years. So these are statistical data. So we also observe that the younger generations are not interested in Jhum cultivation, work in the field. What we have found is that many of the farmers belong to the older generation. So there is a shift of migration of the younger generation from the rural to the urban area in search of more better jobs. So that we have found out this as well. So these observations, I think it implies that there is not too much pressure on our forests as often cited by many. And
Sure.
but to substantiate this, we need more research, in depth, more research in Mizoram. I think
Sure.
I can, end with those.
Yeah. Thank you. Very important. I think what you're saying is that we need to back all of these observations and not create an alarm without evidence-based, studies.
Yes.
Thank you for raising those issues and also telling us what your own studies and what the earlier study by Ms. Daman Singh has taught us. And so now I'm moving to a linked question to Dr. Lalengzama, because Dr. Lalengzama, since you bring in the expertise in the area of social science research on shifting cultivation, as well as your interest and research expertise on community development, agrarian structure change and its impact on rural development have always been a fertile area as far as social science research is concerned, right? According to you, Dr. Lalengzama, what are some of the prompt efforts that can be initiated to involve indigenous communities to carry out forest-based activities and to enhance livelihood of local communities by involving them in non-timber-based forest products?
Thank you, ma'am. This is a very important question that we, as a researcher, we need to answer. First of all, let me give my opinion on this one. Uh, Although the agrarian structure change and its impact on rural development have been a fertile area of research, but from the review of literature, what we have been observing is that the emic and ethic perspective, they are not balanced. So many studies are from the outsider's perspective. This is why many government policies and programs, they are not mainly towards some efforts to improve shifting cultivation, but always towards removal of shifting cultivation. So let me put my first point in supplement to what Dr. John have said. We need to fix the narrative where shifting cultivation is regarded as the main cause of destroying environment. There is no doubt that shifting cultivation has somehow contributed and towards the degrading environment, but it is very harsh and biased like comments from my side to be regarded as the main cause. So like what Dr. John have just said, that we need to put the emic and the ethic perspective together, and this narrative can be changed through unbiased research and observation. And the second point that I would like to bring is that although shifting cultivation is one of the profession that is practiced by the elder people, and then it is not increasing, as Dr. John said, we need to find a solution in a way that without winning away shifting cultivation, we need to develop shifting cultivation, because the rural livelihood is depending on it, and many generations have been depending on shifting cultivation. And until and unless we provide a better livelihood opportunities, we cannot do away with shifting cultivation. So in terms of tools and technology use, we need to pressurize the government in terms of policy, even to invest more for development of shifting cultivation and a similar farming system in a particular area. And the third one is we also need to check the fallow period, shrinking of community land, because we all know that shifting cultivation is practiced in a community land mainly. So if the government do not have land ceiling system, that the rich people owning more land, and which shrink the community land. So if we don't check this one, we are endangering the development of shifting cultivation as well as the rural livelihood. And in the meantime, we need to check the loss of topsoil, all these the types of crops that we are cultivating. all this needs to be improved. It should not be just for a mere sustenance. So we need to upgrade the types of crops cultivated, the protection of topsoil and other farming system. And we need to systematize local market. And one of the things that we observe here in Mizoram is that one very important thing is that there is a commercialization of shifting cultivation. People have been growing commercial crops in Jhum land. So they don't cultivate lots of crops in Jhum cultivation. They cultivated one or two crops, commercial crops. So, for example, chili, ginger. So they cultivated in the Jhum land, and commercialization takes place even among the shifting cultivators also. So in order to help them, we need to systematize the local marketing system. And in the last point, ma'am, like uh, as Dr. John rightly said, that we need to have simple and effective technology, communication, transport link, agriculture field and market. So all these, we need to move from sustenance to commercialization. So this is the best way, one of the, like my suggested way to help shifting cultivation. I think
Sure.
I answer your question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, you did respond very well. And now we are moving to the third panelist, Dr. Jaydev Mandal. Again, coming back to you and from your position of expertise, what efforts do you think can be undertaken on the part of the concerned authorities to protect degraded forest lands and to conserve them by the formation of village forest communities? In an effort to divert the indigenous farmers from traditional shifting practices to sustainable cultivation methods. Would like to hear from you on
Yes,
that.
ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. So my first request is, let's not presume shifting cultivation is unsustainable or not sustainable. So shifting cultivation is one of the oldest form of agriculture being practiced in the hilly terrains in most of the Southeast Asian countries. And as Dr. John Zothanzama said, so many research findings or many medias, they claim that the earlier there is to be more gap between the successive fallow periods of shifting cultivation. But all those studies suggest it was about to be 20 to 25 years. But we ask, where is this documented anywhere? Where are the data? So no, we don't have scientific data for that. That the fallow cycle of shifting cultivation is going reduced nowadays, because most of the studies cite the, suppose for say now we are doing some research in 2000, so we'll cite the studies conducted by earlier workers in 1990s and which they cite in 1980s, and all those. So when I move back to those 1980s, they cited some of the works that were conducted during 1970s, and those are the pioneering, and they just presumed, and this is just a common belief, that earlier the Jhum cycle used to be 20 to 25 years. But from our perspective, what we from field data, when we interviewed the elderly people in fields, so they used to say usually the rested fallow period for Jhum cycle is usually 7 to 10 years. But we say that this was never been so, and because most of the elderly people to whom we did interview, they suggested that the ideal resting period was 7 to 10 years, and which we found is the very good number of years for the fallow lands to regenerate to a very good secondary forest to harbor very rich natural biodiversity, and also to form a very good buffer zone for any kind of protected area. And also, as Dr. see, Lalengzama also mentioned and that if we can subsidize, that if government can subsidize or to the communities in the villages who are doing Jhum cultivation, then there will be very good practice of Jhum in the coming years, and we also need more research at how this can be improved. No doubt, in some areas the cycle is decreased to 2 to 3 years, and that places the Jhum, we may think that this is creating some kind of habitat destruction. Very nice time for fallow periods to regenerate. And what we think that, and recently, like India Today Bond Convention, and which they suggested that there will be millions of hectares of forest will be regenerated. And what we feel that if those money can be given to the community forest or community for community conservation, then there will be very scientific and very the amalgamation of scientific and traditional knowledge towards the betterment of shifting cultivation.
Okay, thank you so much to all the three panelists. And I think, you know, what we are hearing possibly as a common thread across all the three panelists is that, you know, arguably all the kind of concerns that are being raised about shifting cultivation are actually to be seen in the context of a much more robust scientific research evidence that backs it, and that there is no alarm, as we can understand from the kind of concerns that are usually out there in popular perception. And I think all three of them have basically said that at the center of this entire set of arguments and debate, we need to look at the communities that are involved, look at the livelihoods of people, that is important, and look at ways in which we do our research studies in a robust scientific manner, so that we look and protect communities. So with that, I would like to actually request our very esteemed keynote speaker, Dr. Bhupesh Choudhary, to make his concluding remarks. Having listened to all the panelists, can we maybe request you to have your concluding observations on this panel discussion?
Thank you, Dr. Kalpana and all the panelists. It was indeed quite a privilege to listen to all those diverse views and the point of view and the experience and the insight that was brought in by the various panelists. And I was very much impressed when we have now started talking about the evidence-based decision making. In fact, this is one of the areas where government is also making concerted efforts to so that evidence-based decision making is the center of all the policy making, and our policies are just not based on the whims and fancies or on the just the perception or just the perceived knowledge, but rather based on the hard facts. So like all the three panelists that spoke about, while there is a lot of talk about Jhum being anti-environment or not good, but there is no hard fact or there's no hard evidence that Jhum is actually debilitating to the environment. It may rather be helpful to regenerate, and it could be the opposite way, in fact. So but and how Dr. John and Dr. Zama also, they talk about the use of technology. So we have to find a solution. So this is a challenge, and every challenge will present an optimal solution. An optimal solution which we will find, which we are striving to find now, is not the same as it was 100 years back. So but it has to be an optimal solution which suits our times and our needs. And so that's where the technology comes in. So we have to leverage the technology in a very endurable way to find out how best we can address those problems, because the problem itself is transforming. As you have Dr. Jaydev, I think he was talking about transformation. So the problem is so quickly transforming that we cannot think of it as an isolated problem. This is no more isolated. This is quite very much linked to the land use, the monetization of the land, the linkages of the markets, the employment within the communities, the youths, the training, the money. And the most important is the money. I think at the center of this lies the money part, the economics. Ultimately, it is the horse which makes the ultimately I think it is the money which makes the horse run, you know. So we cannot not talk about money right here. We have to give remuneration. We have to make a solution which is providing livelihood opportunities to the communities, because everything has changed now. The society has changed, the community linkages have changed. They are not the same which they were 50 years back. So the society, although Mizo society, I having spent like 3 years here in Mizoram, I can say it is still a very close society, closely knit society. But still, it is opening up. Like every other society, it is opening up. The problem is changing. The lot of other people are the physical barriers, the mental barriers. Everything is being broken. So new frontiers are being achieved. So that's what I feel. You know, we have to think the problem as a composite problem, and that's why the solution is not going to be a very easy and a straightforward one. The solution will also involve us thinking in various directions, like for example, as I've told, that how to monetize how is the land being monetized, what are the land administration policies being followed within the state, and are the land records being maintained properly, and what is the ownership pattern of the land. So all those things they have to work together, and then we have to find out how best we can leverage the technology and to find a optimal solution. And again, I would like to thank Balipara Foundation, especially you, Dr. Kalpana, and all our three panelists who have spent their valuable time to discuss on this very complex and uh, emerging and a very crucial problem to the date, and trying to find a solution. I wish them all the best in whatever they are doing, and I hope Bali Para Foundation will continue um, having such webinars which continue to address the contemporary problems which we are all facing as a society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bhupesh Choudhury. It's been an absolute pleasure to be associated with this panel. And I think, like you said, bringing in all these expertise that all of you, all the four, the keynote speaker and the three panelists have come in. It brings in a very integrated understanding. And like you said very correctly, it's a very, very complex set of issues that it throws up in its wake. But we are extremely grateful to the Eastern Himalayan Metronomics Forum and the Bali Para Foundation for giving us this opportunity. And I would like to thank you and thank each of the panelists and the keynote speaker, Dr. Bhupesh Choudhury, as well as the three panelists, Dr. John Zothanzama, Dr. Jaydev Mandal, and Dr. Lalengzama. I'm handing it over to Ms. Cynthia Doley for taking this forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has truly been an insightful discussion on shifting in Mizoram. And I thank you to all the panelists, moderator, and the participants. And thank you to Dr. Chaudhary for your valuable time. We hope to stay connected and work towards Mizoram in the Eastern Himalayas. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is really nice interacting with Dr. C. Lalengzama, Dr. John Zothanzama, Dr. Bhupesh Choudhury, and of course, ma'am, with Kalpana Sarathy, ma'am. And thank you, Cynthia and Balipara Foundation. And this, what I feel, we need more research towards shifting cultivation, and we'll in future we'll do and work towards the betterment of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.